Good. Let's go.
Great. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, gang, and welcome back to Alien Protocols. It's a real pleasure to have someone that I'm a big fan of and have been for a while. He is a doctor. He is an author. He's written some amazing books, Opening Minds, Crop Circles and Resonance, Planetary Intelligence, and he founded the research and teaching company for remote viewing, Mount Baldy Institute, very well known amongst remote viewers, crop circle researchers, and many others. Please welcome Dr. Simeon Hein. Dr. Hein, such a pleasure.
Hey, buddy. Thanks for having me here today. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, no, we really appreciate your time very much. You're so well known for kind of what a lot of people would think are two separate fields, remote viewing and crop circles.
Oh, yeah.
How did you get started in this, and how do they connect?
It's a really good question. I guess I have to say when I was in graduate school a long time ago, studying statistics and research methods, I never thought this is where I'd end up, but I'm glad I did. This is a great payoff for years of research to find out how reality really works. Not the way we were told it works in school. How does it really work? And in 1996, I had just moved to Boulder, Colorado. I had moved there without knowing a single person. It was just a gut feeling. I went through there. I was camping up in Estes Park. And a couple of friends of mine had mentioned Boulder, like over the course of a week, people who didn't know each other. I thought I should go investigate this place. And I came down from Estes Park with my dog, and we were just driving through, and I had this weird deja vu feeling like I had been there before. And it was so strong, it got me to move from Idaho, where I had recently bought a house. I had been a statistics teacher up at WSU, and
Wow.
across the border in Moscow, Idaho. And I Boulder, just there was some strong thing. I just felt, okay, that's it. And I moved to Boulder, and a couple weeks later, I turned on the radio, and this guy was talking about remote viewing. His name was Dr. Courtney Brown.
Wow.
And, yeah. And he said, something's teachable. In my mind, I was like, okay, I'm open, but not that open. But I decided just to get the book at the bookstore that he'd written called Cosmic Voyage. And I put the book back in the shelf and walked out of the store. And as I walked out of the store, this little voice in my head said, that book could change your whole view of reality. You should go back and read it, get it. So I went back in the store and got the book. And this doesn't sound that different than other people's stories who've gotten involved with this and channeling and other things. There's a little voice they say, come on. But they just, something makes them stop. Whatever that is. I went and got the book, and I thought, I just can't believe this. It was all about the ability to see things at a distance using some innate ability that we have. And my graduate school mind couldn't accept that this was like real. But in the book, he had an 800 number and said, call if you want to take a class in this. And I thought, well, I should be open-minded and at least take the class and decide if what I'm reading is true. Because Courtney in there he was working as a viewer, and he was viewing Face on Mars and all of these things and UFOs and climate change. And this was all a little bit too much. Now, I wasn't totally closed off to these topics. I did have a sighting with my mom in the Everglades in the late 70s. And we were bird watch. My mom was a bird watcher, and something came over that looked like the moon, but it wasn't the moon. It was the size of the moon. It was glowing, but it wasn't the moon. And then it moved from a standstill position into a moving position. Anyway, after having that experience in the 70s, where it really was weird. We had binoculars, and there was a pattern in it. So it was like amorphous, but structured at the same time, a little weird. I did start reading a couple books. I read a book by John Keel, Mothman Prophecies. And I guess that was a good book to start out with as a 14-year-old. Came across Carlos Castaneda and a couple of things. So I had a couple, some possibilities in my mind. But once I got to school, those topics dropped off. I stopped investigating any of that stuff. I wasn't looking for anything different. I was just going to school. And somehow this all kind of came back through RV. So no one mentioned UFOs or remote viewing in graduate school. I'm talking, buddy, I had a long time without any of these topics getting my PhD. And it was Courtney's class that like blew open a gasket again in a good way. Because, if you go to school for a long time, you think you know how the world works. you think you have this sense of what's real, right? What the data are showing you. And you have all these methods, and you're taking a lot of classes, you finally get your PhD if you go that far. And you really feel like, okay, I'm in control now, right? I'm in the driver's seat. You know, I've got some publications, blah, 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 blah. And then you come across something like RV. And I went and took his course, and within a couple of days, I was describing very well on a piece of blank paper drawings and descriptors of targets that we wouldn't be shown until an hour later. And my mind I said, how's that possible, right? And it's what this has really been about ever since is, okay, I've seen it in front of my own eyes. There's no way I could know what this is. No one's saying anything. We're sitting in cubicles, just the way the military did it. You know, as your listeners and viewers will probably know, this was a military program, and that's where Courtney found out about it. It was declassified in 1995. And you've worked with people that were involved with it and so forth, but I didn't know about any of this. I didn't see the Ted Koppel show in 1995 where this was declassified. I just happened to turn on my local community radio station. There was Courtney Brown talking about remote viewing, and anyone could do this. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take the class, and I did, and it worked. And everyone in the class got results. And I really couldn't ignore what was in front of my eyes. The results were you're getting very accurate information about a distant target. Even if I was describing just a sheet of paper in the photograph, how would you explain that from any conventional academic point of view? You couldn't. But, you know, the difference between me and perhaps other people is I didn't have a steady academic job at the time. I had been a stats teacher back at WSU where I had gone to graduate school, and they'd hired me back for a semester to teach stats. And I didn't really have any commitment to the system at that particular moment when I was taking Courtney's course. Perhaps if I had been in a tenure track position in a department somewhere, I would have said, oh, that's interesting, and gone back to my job with a steady salary and all the perks you get from being, you know, in an institutionalized job and all that stuff. But I didn't have that at the time. So this to me looked like something that really was a game changer. And because I had no investment at the time in reinforcing the status quo, I started looking into this, right? And I ended up working with Lynn Buchanan, who was one of the military initially hired to do something called remote influencing. I mean, what the heck is that? And then became a teacher of RV. He had worked with Ingo Swann.
Would you explain briefly what remote influencing is? Because a lot of people don't understand it, and that's even harder to believe than the regular remote viewing is. It's that next level.
RV in itself is kind of, as Ingo said, a mother of a surprise to find out that it worked and that the average person had this built in. That, you know, because statistically, if you look at it, you'll see that, like Jessica Utz, the statistician from, you know, actually the head statistician for the American Statistical Association, she was the president. Maybe she still is. But she held that job as president of the American Statistical Association. She did this analysis for Congress when it was declassified. She concluded, if you look through it, that it worked. And she only looked at like 19 sessions. They had done thousands of sessions. She looked like a very small number of sessions. That the viewers were getting about 8% more accuracy than they would be getting if they were just guessing. And that there was something going on here, even though we didn't have a coherent theory to explain it, about a subterranean channel of information below the conscious mind, which you're aware of because you're a viewer too. That you're getting information in a way that nobody told you about. It doesn't fit in the standard Western scientific model, but the data show that it's real. And even the critics like Ray Hyman and others at the time said, well, we can see the data is real, but that's not enough to convince us it's real. It has to have a theory also to explain it. I mean, I don't know why. They're kind of inventing this and thinking, the data's there, but how do we know what's really going on? That's kind of the skeptics often say things like this. I'm open to being a skeptic. I mean, I was one initially too. It was my own experience thinking it was real. But so we knew from the data it was real. And the military attempted to see what else they could do with it. They started it in the 70s. The Soviet Union had a program in the 60s based on this idea that we had a program, which we didn't, but they thought we did, going back to World War II, right? All that stuff. And so the U.S. starts its own program in the early 70s because if the Russians had it, we had to have it too, right? Yeah. And so they didn't want it to work. I mean, that is what Ed May, who worked after Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, Ed May took over SRI. And he said, he reminded us all recently at one of these conferences in the Las Vegas area that the original purpose of the government getting involved was to disprove it. They didn't want it to be real because they didn't have to worry about Russians and Soviet spies looking at our military installations during the Cold War remotely from wherever they were.
And that program ran for 20 years, right?
Right. It ran for 20 years, allegedly $20 million. Allegedly, it was stopped. If it was still going, I imagine it could be going. It might have been privatized. We don't really know. But it went for 20 years, and they wanted to show it didn't work, but it did, because they got people like Ingo Swann out there who, because of his thermistor experiment with Gertrude Schmeidler, was able to show that he could influence the temperature of thermistors, and he sent the paper to Hal, and they were looking for psychics, and Hal said, well, this is a peer-reviewed paper. Ingo had published it. He and Gertrude Schmeidler had, so he went out there, and he was able to affect a magnetometer, according to Hal. And Hal showed us the graphs. You know, this thing is very steady. It's calibrated to reject the vibrations of airplanes overhead and trucks. I mean, it
doesn't have a major electromagnetic shielding around it too, as well.
Major electromagnetic shielding, and it's probably encased in some sort of rubber shielding and to keep vibrations. I mean, it's supposed to be rock steady magnetometer, right?
So that would discount all forms of electromagnetic frequencies and all those things that might be the cause of this stuff. Okay.
Everything. But there, Ingo, Hal says, put your mind, can focus on the magnetometer, needle starts to wiggle around. Hal says, do it again, does it again, 3 times. Wow. That was enough for Hal. Just like it was enough for Kit Green, who we mentioned before. We talked, someone else who was involved in this program a little later on, who did this for, the intelligence agencies. The CIA was the one that initially funded this. And the DIA also picked it up and had a kind of another program going on. They were working with Joe McMonagle back on the East Coast. But the whole point was to disprove it. But Hal saw these 3 magnetometer changes and said, okay, something's really going on here. Kit, they demonstrated to Kit 3 times. Kit wanted to see it 3 times, Kit Green. He told us this is public knowledge at the Ufo Conference in Las Vegas a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he had 3 times where he said he didn't need to look at the statistics. It obviously worked. Especially when they viewed the NSA Sugar Grove facility in West Virginia, right?
It was supposed to be, that facility was supposed to be, no one knew about it. It was blacked out. And didn't they even come up with the names of people inside? I think that was Pat Price or somebody.
Pat Price was able to view the code names of the projects they were working on. It had to do with listening to Soviet satellites as they went overhead.
Wow.
And picking up data from them. Yeah.
Wow.
And all the code names were related to pool, cue ball, 8-ball.
Oh, wow.
And Pat Price sat there writing these down from a distance of 3,000 miles away in San Francisco at SRI, Palo Alto, excuse me. And that really alarmed me. And that wasn't even the target. It was actually someone's summer home about a quarter mile away. But both Pat Price and Ingo, they were attracted to this facility. The subconscious mind wants to have fun, and they were bored with this summer cabin that was the actual target. Initially, they thought they were making it up until Kit got the family in a station wagon. So let's go for a ride. And he drove out there and found the summer cabin of his colleague at the CIA. And then he said, what? He drove another down the road a little bit, and he saw the gate. And he had the security clearances to find out what was going on in there. And they nailed these targets. And for Kit, that was enough, plus 2 other targets that he told us about, 2 other sessions that were viewing, his current location and when he was in the church. But he said, this is the most important thing, buddy. He didn't need statistics after seeing this. It was so beyond any possibility of fraud or chance that you get such 3 accurate sessions, especially reading code words from inside a safe. I mean, Pat Price said, I smushed my head into the safe and read the code names. Now, what the hell is going on there?
Yeah, astral projecting. He also, there's a very famous case of him lying on the roof of that building with the gigantic crane that went over, and it was the Russian facility, space facility.
Yeah, the Soviet research facility in Semipalatinsk. And,
wow.
So
already, just briefly in this just short conversation, we've seen remote viewing, the ability to see distant places. We've seen psychokinesis with Ingo Swann able to move stuff. and they wanted to do remote influencing. Now they
Right.
weren't.
So that was your question, and I want to get back to yeah.
What were they wanted to do remote
Okay,
influencing
so
with?
that is what they see. They were attracting different people to the program. First, they started with natural psychics. Then they started training ordinary people to see if it worked for them. And it worked in some cases better, even for just ordinary people like Hella Hamid and others. You know, they want to test subjects, natural psychics and ordinary people.
Mm.
And they found out about Lynn Buchanan, who had this ability to affect things at a distance with his mind. He had this, you can read his book, Seventh Sense. It's quite good, about how he got involved. But it started out when there was this bully in school, and the guy kept bothering him. And one day he said in his mind, I really wish that wind gust came and blew that guy off his bike, or something like that. That paraphrasing. And it happened. The next thing you know, the kid was off his bike on the ground.
Yeah.
Lynn wondered if he had done it. And then he realized every time he got angry, something like that would happen. It eventually culminated in him blowing up a NATO computer system during a demonstration where a buddy of his who was jealous of his abilities sabotaged his demonstration for the NATO High Command.
Wow.
I forget where the meeting was, but all the High Command were there, and Lynn got so angry at this guy for putting a bug into his program, because Lynn was a computer programmer, that he saw the guy and he got really angry, and he said, I don't want to hurt anyone. So he turned his head away, and all of his psychokinetic energy went into the NATO computer system, which apparently, according to Lynn, blew out the entire system worldwide.
Wow.
And the Russian system. The Soviet system was also blown out because they could tell.
Wow.
And so that's remote. So they wanted him in the program to see if he could, destroy things at a distance, influence it at things. Now, Lynn is a very religious man. I've known him for a long time. He's a very moral person. He's a devout Christian. So he didn't consider it acceptable to use his skills for harm.
Yes.
But what he did say he would do with it occasionally is influence world leaders in a direction that they're already going in, like Gorbachev or perestroika and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
He said in his book he had requests to assassinate Gorbachev remotely with his mind, but he refused to do it. Whether he was capable of doing it or not, he never said. But some guys dressed in suits picked him up one day and said, can you do this for us? He goes, absolutely not. But he got this idea, maybe I could influence. And then he said he kept planting these ideas. So remote influencing is not this magic trick where you make people do things they don't want to do. It's a very slight, light form of influencing where you push something in the direction it's already going in. Right? And it comes back to you too. So you have to be careful what you do. Lynn always said it would come back to him. Whatever he was sending out kind of came back to him and his family. So but it's basically connecting with that person. So to answer your question, buddy, I'm saying a lot here, but I just want to tell the audience.
It's a very dense topic. I mean, it's hard to unpack.
Very dense. Unfortunately, the American public doesn't know the story about this because our media still wants to focus on really superficial stuff.
And you're talking about specific important incidents. So this is all really, really important. And, a lot of people don't understand that, that layer, whatever you call it, that consciousness field, Vernon Neppy calls it the Gimel. Some people call it the Akashic record, or whatever you call it. It's there and it's real and it's a connection. And that connection isn't just for viewing, it's a connection. And that connection can be used to influence and all sorts of things. You're really only limited by your belief system to a degree.
That's the answer to your question. It can be, you can be a receiver of the information, not someone intending it. You putting your mind on a so-called distant target, which, maybe it's not so distant as it looks. Maybe that's one of the implications here, is that things are connected in ways we don't visually see, physically see, but they're connected. And Lynn showed that you could extend psychokinesis remotely to kind of an influence. To push things slightly in a direction. And I've seen evidence of psychokinesis too, physically, where people could twist bottles into liquids and bend things and make your hands on your clock spin around. I've seen this in Japan when I was teaching RV there, so I know it's real. I've talked about this on other places. So I've seen demonstrations of psychokinesis, which I know are real too. So there's a whole range of phenomena here. And the question is, what are we dealing with? We need to get beyond the point where we're saying, is it real? Is it just a hoax? This is real. I think the data show that it's real. It may not be a common skill that everyone has as Ingo or Pat Price or Lynn Buchanan, or Joe McMonagle, people like that. Real.
What do you think it is? I mean, what do you think the mechanics is? Is it an unnameable substructure to all of reality that all connects to one point and we can connect to that point? Is it a consciousness field, as Dr. Bernanke says? Is it like, if this universe is a simulation, is it kind of like the motherboard and the only way we can perceive it and we're tapping into that motherboard? You studied this a long time.
Yeah,
What does that tell you?
Well, I do have my ideas about it. Now, I can't prove that these are right, but I pretty sure at this point we're living in a multiverse. It's not just a universe, it's a multiverse, and there are parallel realities to us. There are other versions of things going on in those parallel realities, and you tend to resonate with the ones that are most similar to you. So you get precognitive experiences, impressions of things that maybe are going to happen in an hour or 2 hours or to your loved ones when it matters. Because in some reality, it's already happening. The only way I can see, buddy, after doing a lot of viewing sessions and teaching it for many years and working with a lot of students, it's just so much fun I've really been honored to work with a lot of great people. Every average people turn out to be great people when they do viewing because they push themselves to do something they didn't think they could do. And I always respect that in people. You know, they come to the class, they give it their best shot, and all of a sudden, boom, they drew the picture. I was like, you're never the same after that. You spend all these years of conditioning from our educational system, from society, and you kind of get dulled down by normalcy.
Yeah.
And then you do this viewing, also, how the heck did I do that? And you don't know because no one's there to talk to about it. No one's going to tell you it's real. So yeah, I've been lucky to work with a lot of people who had the courage to come to the class and do their best, and they do. They get results. And so I've looked at this a long time. So how could you describe something you won't be shown for an hour? And it's not that it's sitting there in the folder and that you're looking at it now, because sometimes the target's not chosen for an hour or for a week. So the target doesn't even exist yet, but you can still describe what you're going to be shown in an hour or at the end of the week. Like if you're doing ARV experiments, binary experiments, you can play with the stock market and things like that to see if you can predict it. And we've done that for fun sometimes, and it worked. And people have tried it for decades, have gotten positive results. It shows you can predict the future sometimes. So the only way in my mind that could work is the future is already happening now, and you're somehow accessing that reality. Now, there's a very strong, in this view, and I'm not saying you have to believe this, but in this view, to look at it consistently, the universe, the world that you've grown up in, has a very powerful motivation to keep you focused on the present, because that's where most of the action is. We're physical creatures. We need to eat and take care of ourselves and avoid having accidents and all that, right? But if you have a little energy and attention left over, you could view other things that are not directly connected to your life right at this immediate moment. And that's what RV is. You have this spotlight search function, and it can look at different things. Normally, it's pretty much focused on what's right in front of you. I mean, that's the way physical reality is. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, I love physical reality as much as anyone else. But
it can be distracting, yeah.
Yeah. But there's something else going on too, besides it. And we all experience that when we dream at night, you know? So that we have this dual side, this dual nature. Society's not comfortable with it. Some societies deal with this by saying we have a shadow side, and they have more in actually older societies, indigenous societies, where they have rituals and times and ceremonies for people to contact their other nature, right? Somehow in the West, we really want to push that aside. It was seen as witchcraft or something. Yeah. And we pushed it away. But we all have another side to ourselves. I mean, at the very minimum, you experience it when you sleep at night, right?
Yeah, real different places and things, you feel it, yeah.
Very, very different version of yourself. Now, even if you're not experiencing that, just you sleeping, you're a very different person when you're sleeping. You just talk to your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend or someone that, you know, shares time with you at night, and they'll say you're a different person at night. Maybe not someone who they even want to be around, you know? I mean, and it's not just snoring. I'm not just talking about waking them up. It's
Oh, the
like
personality. Some people are grumpy in the mornings. Everyone knows this person's universally grumpy every
you
morning.
wake up, exactly, that's what I'm talking about. So we all know that we have different sides to ourselves. It's just the social definition of ourselves in Western culture prefers that we're an individual with a personality and identity.
Mm.
But from my research, buddy, I think it's more likely we're multivisuals.
Mm.
Like even the version that you and I talking right now, it's one version of you and me that's connecting right now. We have other aspects to ourselves. I think that's what RV shows. And those other channels are accessible while you're awake if you want to spend some time and energy accessing them. And people who've gotten are involved with RV, as you know, it takes a lot of energy to do it. You've seen that you can break through, like Jim Morrison said, break on through to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it's real.
And you get used to that signal. At first, it's a very distant subtlety, and this sublime, it's like the most sublime thing almost you can imagine. It's almost not imagining. It's almost this thing that comes to you in these moments of complete tranquility, of when you forget the material world, when you shrink from your senses. It's almost like it comes rushing to you. It's not as if, I mean, my experience is I don't search for it when I'm in those places. It rushes to me. I don't feel like I'm doing anything magical. I feel like it's doing something. I'm just forgetting my senses.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting the physical world. I'm listening to that signal that I've gotten familiar with, this nothingness kind of. It's very hard to describe.
Very hard to describe. I think that's very accurate. It's like coming to you, getting out of your way. You have to let it happen.
Yeah. Oh, you just said it wonderfully. Get out of your own way, kind of. Yeah.
You wouldn't know that until you had done it and taken RV, right? You think I got to work really hard and focus, right? And really, it's not not that, right? It's not that. Alan Watts would enjoy this conversation because that's what he would talk about a lot. We're all used to like trying really hard and, you know, I really want to get enlightened. I really want this, you know. And Alan Watts pointed out, you know, the philosopher from the 60s that
Sure.
people have heard of, or if you haven't heard of him, it's fun to listen to him. This is what he was talking about, is it's actually learning to be present, to let it come to you. But our monkey mind wants to figure it out. And it, unfortunately, it can't actually. I have found meditation to be very helpful in just learning for twice a day just to stop doing anything and just let it come to me.
Yes.
But it doesn't have to be meditation. Any sort of discipline. It could be anything that you do. It could be exercise or running. I mean, it's different for different people, or yoga or whatever works for you. But that experience of realizing you're part of something bigger and you don't always need to try to make things happen. There's nothing wrong with focus and attention and all that, but obviously a lot of the best things that are going on for you are happening without your consciousness, right? Digestion, breathing, reproduction, all these other things are not things you're doing. They're happening to you, or it feels that way.
Yeah.
And RV is like that, as you point out.
Wow, you have, in this brief, just so far in this brief conversation, I've heard the best explanation of the background of it, the most clearest kind of perspective on it, where it comes from, why, even though it's still a complete mystery, you know,
complete mystery.
Your perspective is just how you phrased it is just one of the clearest. Well, of course, you teach this. You founded the Mount Baldy Institute for this. You're one of the most recognized people in this field. We're going to have to, we would be so kind in the future, I'd love to do a whole separate one on crop circles, because you've done so much incredible research on that. And
yeah, it's been one hell of a ride.
And this, and it's
I'm not kidding. I mean, topics all connect. These topics all connect together. I'm happy to come back and do a whole nother thing on the crop. Oh, you did ask me. Okay, so half an hour. Sorry, you have half an hour ago. You asked about the crop circles just briefly. I just got back from England doing our tour, and I think you saw some of my YouTube videos where I showed the weird things that happened to the cameras. Again, it's happened so many times. Not in the field, but just in the circles you walk in. That came out of Courtney's target selection for us. Towards the end of the 8-day class, he put in a couple different types of targets after viewing things like Mount Kilimanjaro and Eiffel Tower, Washington Monument, and a couple famous people and things like that, and famous events. He threw in a UFO, a crop circle, and a historical target. Those are non-verifiable. He did that to show us that non-verifiable targets feel different a little bit, and you're moving around in time. It's a little different, but it's fun to do it as a practice exercise, not being able to prove at the end, oh, I know what's at the face of Mars, but just as an experience.
Mm.
And he gave us a crop circle, and I didn't know what it was in 1996. I had never heard of what a crop. What? There's a pattern in the wheat. Well, who's making it? Well, he said, we don't know who's making it. They just show up. And I thought, what? Well, I ended up going to a UFO conference after working with Courtney for a couple of months. I took his class and came back for his advanced training. And sometime that summer in 96 in Denver, there was a UFO conference. There's a hotel there along I-25 with this round hotel, and it was in that building. And it was my first UFO conference. I thought, oh my God, what are these people going to walk around with Vulcan ears? And boy, was I didn't know what to expect. Remember the UFO? I was wrong. It was serious. There was people there talking about implants who had brought the samples. Who was that fellow who worked with Roger Lear?
The surgeon.
Yeah. Roger Lear had an assistant back then, and he was working with this other guy who he brought pieces of what they had taken out of people. Something that had fallen out of someone's eye that looked like a grain of rice, but was allegedly a little camera or something. I mean, my mind was like, oh, come on, this can't be true. But here were the samples and the stories that people, there were wounds, but I mean, there were implants with no flesh wounds. Impossible. No scars. So that was an interesting talk to be exposed to the work of Dr. Roger Lear, who I was fortunate, I was able to meet him many times at UFO conferences over the past 20 years until he passed over last year. Really loved his research. What's that?
That was a big loss. He was the only guy doing that stuff. He had,
people of that caliber, buddy, changed my mind about the whole thing, because then you realize, well, wait a minute. What else is true that haven't been told about? That's what RV started for me. There was a guy there talking about crop circles, and he said, we don't know who's making them and what they mean, but I'm giving a tour. You can come along. It was a reasonable price for a week-long tour there, and I thought, great, I'll go over and see for myself what I was viewing in my RV session. And that's when I started to see the battery and camera failure. Not to me, but people have talked about it. I thought, well, that's something, as a scientist, you could have the evidence. It's empirical. It's not just a story. You could actually see it for yourself. And it started happening to our devices. The first time I saw it happen, someone put Ron Russell, the guy leading the crop circle tour, he put his camera down in a place called Danebury in 1997, an old hill fort. It was a 3-part crop circle, and it melted on the inside of the camera.
Wow.
It never worked again that summer. He had to send it back to Sony. They said the power supply got so hot it melted the solder joints on the wires going into the power supply. And I'm thinking, what could do that? I mean, they don't normally overheat. Your cameras don't just sit there and decide, okay, I'm going to overheat. You put it down in the crop circle, overheated.
I mean, you hear that time and time again. Everything is, and it's interesting. It's not only just associated with crop circles and UFOs. You hear those things associated with remote viewing as well, too. So when you're tapping into whatever this thing is, there's something, that connection. Maybe it's opening the doors. Maybe there's some sort of field. I mean, to some degree, you think you can rule out the electromagnetic field because of so many of those shielded experiments, but in a kind of way you can't. Yesterday, I tried to do an interview with someone, and my screen went white. I'd never had my screen go white 2 times in the middle of the interview. I'd go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hi and welcome, click. Same thing happened again. And then this might be associated with something different. He had his mouse moving around without him touching it. His mouse was moving around the screen. And there's just weird things. I went to my rental car, pick up my rental car here to come to Vegas to a conference. And the guy says, oh, let me check you. And he starts checking me, and his computer goes down, and all 5 of the computers go down. He's like, sometimes one will go down, but I've never seen all of them go down. And sometimes, of course, it can be statistical chance and weirdness, but it happens so many times that is statistically unusual. Or it's
buddy, is that something that happens around you a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, you're known for this.
Yeah.
I didn't know this about you. Oh, so there you've seen it happen, and there you see it right again.
Yeah.
Yes, we don't know what this is. We don't really know.
All this stuff is so deep, and Dr. Hein, I'm such a big fan of yours, and you have such important insights, and I hate feeling like I have to rush in this, but we like to give our guys our viewers shorter sessions so that they can feel left wanting more. And I'd love to be able to do another session with you.
I'm happy to come back again and cover these in detail. The crop circles alone could cover a lot of time.
And I have so many questions about the science behind it, which I know you know a lot about.
Let me summarize it.
Please.
Because I like short sessions too. The human mind likes about 50 minutes, and I'm respectful of that. We don't know what's going on. Okay, I think that's what we can ascertain here. These phenomena are real. We've had people who've worked with the government for several decades just in the past couple of months come forward and tell us they don't understand these phenomena either, but they really want to figure it out for their own reasons. But we now know we're living in a universe, we don't understand how it works. The Newtonian point of view was extremely helpful to get us past religious dogmatism of the Middle Ages and philosophical dogmatism. So we have to thank the Newtonian paradigm for being empirically based to look for evidence to get out of that philosophical and religious mire of the Middle Ages where everything was just philosophy and talk and no one cared about data, what we call data nowadays. They didn't care about what was really happening. It had to fit Aristotle or the church or something, or they wouldn't look at it. And it was unfair.
There's dogma versus data. Yeah.
Very confining, and it must have been just. We can identify with those people back then that rebelled against it. We call them scientists now. They wanted to say, look, the way the moon is lighting up, Galileo, the edges of the mountains on the moon, there's got to be a sun, which means we're not the center. It's got to be we're rotating around that. The people figured this out, and so they're imprisoned for this and horrible things. So the scientific revolution is great that it got us past that dogmatism. But unfortunately, it's become its own dogmatism because it got mired in big bureaucratic and academic institutions, especially since World War II, where you had the creation of large intelligence and military establishments that basically want to manipulate our perception of reality because they're so concerned about national security. They almost think that they can justify that. And then they started funding academia and big research organizations, and no one wanted to talk about this topic because this is something that upsets the apple cart. So we really haven't had much progress in 50 years, right? Something like 70.
Yeah.
But we know now this is real because these people have been coming forward from the ATIP program, just to name one thing, Hal Puthoff and others, and saying, look, folks, we need your help. We don't know what's going on here. We have some samples of something we got from somewhere. You're testing it, and it's not acting like typical metals. And, well, can you help us figure out what's going on? Because we all need to work together now. So we're not going to be spending any more money trying to say that you're seeing swamp gas and Venus and flocks of geese. This is actually real. You've been seeing real things ever since Roswell. It's all been real, and we want your help. But
just to interrupt really briefly, I'm sorry. You did a great video on Blue Shift, on how, first I want to tell people need to check out your channel. It's been a resource for me for years. Your videos go back,
YouTube,
over a decade on YouTube. And that people, I think it's a must-see channel if you're into this stuff.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, buddy.
And your Blue Shift one specific, there's so many great ones, but the Blue Shift discussion was wonderful. You have so many wonderful discussions, but that one particularly was a topic I love. But
no, thanks, buddy. We're really, all of us watching this, we're so lucky to be alive right now. We're seeing something that doesn't happen very often, which is an entire paradigm shift of reality, just as much as Copernicus back in the 1500s, when he started suggesting an alternative cosmological model, right? And that was a pretty big change. People were awfully comfortable thinking we were the center of everything. The reason they weren't interested in astronomy or anything out there is they said, well, there isn't anything going on out there. Everything's static beyond the moon. That was the idea. Anything beyond the moon is static. That was the view they got from Aristotle. It's all static out there. There's nothing going on. So why look? And there can't be meteorites, right? Because there's nothing going on. There's no stones in the sky. They were closed off. And it took people like Chladni, the guy that invented cymatics, also discovered meteorites and said these have to be extraterrestrial. This is the original extraterrestrial hypothesis of meteorites. And they said, no, they confiscated all the meteorites, the French Academy. And we think we're so different from that time period, because we're told it's just, that you were looking at Venus and you were looking at swamp gas, and we buy this bullshit,
But you're right. We have front row seats to this paradigm shift.
We're all lucky to be out right now when it's changing. It really is changing, folks. I'm going to tell you, and this is why the Blue Shift video that you're referencing from you was so much fun to make. Here, Hal put off. I've talked to Hal many times, and I got to meet Ingo Swann many times.
Wow.
And Hal came before us and finally said, we knew him as a remote viewing guy. And he's published peer-reviewed articles with Russell Targ, and I think it was Nature magazine and a couple other places. Remote viewing guy, right? Laser physicist turned remote viewing guy. He found out it worked. Well, Hal gets up there and says, well, I haven't told you everything. I've been involved with UFO research the whole time too, or at least a big part of it. And it's real. It's all real. It's just been classified, and now we're being allowed to talk about it. That's all I'll say. And here's what we know so far, which is, well, there we're just talking about the physical materials that make these UFOs or UAPs or whatever you want to call these things. You know, what could make them, why they do appear the way they do, why they're able to move so fast, and because
why they don't appear.
Yeah, all of this. And so Hal gets into this and says it actually is kind of why people get sunburned around them, that, you know, i.e. the Cash Landrum incident in Texas and all these other things that we're told just to forget about. And you know, you can't blame people. You know, Richard Dolan says this. You can't blame the average person for coming home and just, they're having to keep their life together on the wages that they earn and in very challenging conditions, and they don't have time for this. And you can't blame the average person for not focusing on this. This is not something that has a paycheck associated with it. It's out of your sheer mental, your curiosity. You want to find out what's going on. That's what's driven me the whole time. All of these topics that we're mentioning. But they're all connected in some way. And what it shows us is that there's something more going on. And that we're bigger than we thought we were. That it's not that the Newtonian model was wrong. It just is too limited, as Einstein showed us, right? There's just more possibilities. And the only constant we have here to go on, buddy, is we know historically we've been too limited in our thinking the entire way. And I'm not blaming anybody, but the universe seems to keep getting bigger by the week. We're discovering more exoplanets every month, right?
Yeah.
Now it's up to hundreds that could have life. I believe in our own solar system, there was the discovery, I forgot which planet, just a couple of weeks ago, where they found, water was found on Mars.
Yes, on the pole. Yeah.
Well, you know.
And just under the surface, and there's been frozen water as well, too, right?
Yeah. What did they find? They found frozen water there. Was it liquid or? It had to be liquid from the radar, the LiDAR, whatever. Yeah.
Yes, I think there's a transition zone of the frozen portion where, you know, where it's unfrozen to frozen. There's some melting or something. Yeah.
So we know that the whole time throughout, the recent civilization, the past couple of thousand years, it's become bigger and bigger.
Yes.
And we've continually underestimated how big it could be.
Yes.
Even ourselves and what makes us work, and the size of our unconscious minds in making the whole thing work. And now we've discovered the microbiome that, you know, in our own digestive systems and on our skin and in our bodies, we have thousands of organisms that don't even have names that we actually need. We can't live without them. They do things for us. At a minimum, they crowd out the negative bacteria on your skin. Even if we don't know what else they're doing, they're keeping the bad guys away because they're already there. And in our digestive tracts, all these things that digest things, and they've discovered this microbiome has impacts on things like blood sugar level, insulin. It's all these other creatures that found us convenient to live in, but they do a lot for us. And partly people are getting sick because their microbiome is damaged. So we've underestimated the size of the thing. Of course, it's going to apply to space too. Hal recommended reading this book by Peter Sturrock, one of the founders of the SSE, Society for Scientific Exploration. He was at the Picantico Hills meeting with Rockefeller in '97, where they talked about the UFO thing.
Yes.
Called the UFO Enigma, I believe that's what it's called, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that it?
Yep.
Well, he said something in there which I had never heard, but it was very important. People always quote Carl Sagan saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now, I don't know if that statement is true, but even if you accept it, Peter kind of dissects that statement extraordinary evidence isn't one big piece of evidence. It's not a meteor falling from the sky. It could be lots of little pieces of evidence over a long period of time, gradually switching the needle from here to there.
Cumulative.
Yes, right?
Good point.
And it can be cumulative evidence. It's not simply one big piece of evidence. Extraordinary evidence could be all those meteorites that people saw back in the 1700s, which they didn't know what these were. And it was cumulative pieces of evidence. And eventually they realized these are coming from out there. So you can have cumulative evidence. Now, we've had that with RV. We've had it with, as far as I'm concerned, with crop circles affecting our devices, which shows something about it, regardless who makes it. It's real. And UFO question, obviously, at this point, with thousands and thousands of good sightings and trace cases. I mean, and now the government's coming to us, some of the government, and saying, well, we actually have pieces. We don't ask us how we got these pieces. Maybe it fell off, or maybe it crashed, or maybe it came off from a missile hitting it. Hypothetically, I'm not saying how it happened, but we have pieces of these things.
And they've doled out contracts, haven't they? They've doled out contracts for metallic glass, IEC fusion, hypersonic tracking. So it leads you to believe that maybe they have more information that they don't know about, that they're distributing more. So, I mean, you're so right. We're on this forefront of this paradigm shift. And people like you who are teaching people remote viewing, people like you who are teaching people to break past the paradigm of crop circles, we have that front row seat, and it's really a blessing. It's really, really a blessing. And I love a mystery, you know, and like you're saying, we don't know. Every week we're discovering new particles, we're discovering new fields, the Higgs field, you know, we don't know what dark energy is and dark matter. We know so little what the universe is, but things like this give you that little insight, you know, and it's so intense.
There was a reason I called my first book Opening Minds. Because we don't have them for the most part. And I'm not blaming anybody. I know I grew up in the same school system everyone else did. I grew up here in Lower New York, originally in New York City, and my parents moved out to Westchester in the 60s because the schools were, you know, supposed to be better. Anyway, I know what this education system. I was the co-captain of my debate team. I was on the debate team for 4 years in high school. I know how evidence, I know the whole thing. I get it. But you can't keep denying evidence and giving people negative labels and attacking people because they have a different point of view. We're supposed to be a society that's above that. We're supposed to look at evidence. And we've had UFO witnesses going on, especially in the Hudson Valley here, for quite a long time.
That's right.
Yeah. What? I
live in the Hudson Valley, yeah. And I had crazy experiences at our farm, yeah.
You've had them too. So I recently read this book by Linda Zimmerman, the Hudson Valley UFOs. It was excellent. I didn't know over my own neighborhood there were very close-up sightings of discs just down the street from here. Nobody ever talked about this. So what we've got a situation is we've got a lot of witnesses and all these different phenomena, whether it be RV, psychokinesis, UFOs, or whatever, who haven't been given their fair time in the sun. They haven't been given the proper attention they deserve to have. They've been labeled pejoratively. You know, people have these experiences. We give them negative labels. We know that the government agencies involved with UFOs were deliberately giving UFO investigators negative labels, like calling them UFO buffs and enthusiasts. Nick Pope told us this at the Citizen hearing. That's what they did at the MOD Day. While they were secretly going around trying to get a piece of something to investigate, like Hal talked about, and Bigelow Aerospace and all that. They were simultaneously calling people enthusiasts and, you know,
and nuts and whatever, yeah. But they didn't come up with a specific.
They're basically conning us. They're trying to find out what's going on. The MOD had said in this article just in July they had agents, a desk with agents going around the UK just to get a piece of something to try to find out. They're simultaneously spending money to dissuade the public from being interested. I mean, in our society, we're the ones that pay for the government. It's not like the monarchy there where they have their own source of funding. We pay for this here, so we should get what we pay for. And we're not paying them to lie to us and give us disinformation.
Right on.
We've been held back. The reason we're having this Sputnik moment where we're falling behind on UFO research compared to other countries is because we've been dissuading young people from getting involved in it because we call them negative things. We label them and we attack them, and we have very nasty techniques for, you send out the attack squad for UFO witnesses, the debunkers.
Yeah.
And the media contributed to this for many decades by having a lot of poor coverage, if they covered it at all.
Mm.
And they're not, if you have a sighting of a new planet, a new exoplanet, or a new type of phenomena out in the solar system, gravitational waves or anything, or CERN, you get a lot of serious coverage of that, even though it's at the forefront of physics or astronomy.
Yeah.
When I went to the University of Arizona, I used to go to the astronomy lectures, and we were learning about quasars and dark matter. Dark energy hadn't been discovered when I went to University of Arizona in the 80s to do my master's degree. Dark energy hadn't even been discovered.
And
there was just
isn't that the majority of the, I forget, is that like 70% or something or more?
70% of the universe is dark energy, according to what we're told. And it hadn't even discovered when I went to graduate school. Think how little we know. And so I would go to these astronomy things, blown away by quasars and pulsars and dark matter. Okay, dark energy didn't exist back then. And I said, wow, we're making progress, But as soon as you go outside the very narrow boundaries of what academia says in real, they're going to attack you.
Yeah.
You're going to be told you won't get promoted, you won't get tenure, you won't get the funding, you won't get the publications, National Institute of Science won't give you grants. And so you're basically blackmailed into sticking with the system.
And then where do you get the information, Dr. Hein? Where do you get it? Where do you get it from someone credible? If you can't get it from other scientists and stuff, you have to get it from other credible sources and people on the internet, people like you. And I think you're really important about that younger generation we're talking about, who are skeptical, who are also, they think they know everything. They're pragmatic, though. They're not going to listen from some crystal, guru. They want to hear it from someone with a real logical perspective. And I think you're really a great voice in terms of that. And, you're teaching. You're not only researching, you're also teaching these things.
Yeah, we do have classes online. We did a class in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. First time ever I did it up there, not too far where I went for WSU. I just thought it'd be fun to choose another area. We did a 3-day RV class there. Got some excellent results. Had a lot of fun, as usual.
Can you tell people where they can find out more about you and crop circles and remote viewing, and how they can reach out to you if they want to get involved with this stuff or take your classes and stuff?
Yeah, if you want to, just go to my blog where I have information about any of this, and the YouTube videos posted. It's just newcrystalmind.com.
Newcrystalmind.com.
Yeah, that's my blog. And I have a kind of a free mini class people can take. It's learnrv.info.
Great.
Learnrv.info, and it's like a little 7-part class. I put a lot of this on YouTube, and I just organized it, and you can go through and do some practice targets yourself. The thing is, buddy, I don't like people to believe what I'm saying or you're saying. I want them to do it for themselves. You make up your own mind. I could be wrong. I mean, and this thing's, I kind of doubt it, but there's always a possibility. And that's what we've lost, is a kind of sense of humility. You don't really know ultimately what's going on. And it's just important to remind yourself every day you get up, we really are knowing less and less. It's a good thing, because it means we're going to discover new things, and we're going to get out of this old mold, which has been so bureaucratic and, dedicated for so long, and, really basically hardened to the point. Who was that guy that talked about hardening of the attitudes? We talk about hardening the arteries, but you can get hardening of the attitude.
The attitude is true, and especially in this world of science and discovering mysteries,
And yeah, we should do better than this. I mean, and that's what kept me going all these years. I mean, I appreciate your praise and your attention to what I've done, and the fact that you've actually looked at it. I just had, from my education, this belief that you stick to the truth no matter where it leads. It's not a popularity contest. And even just within American history, it's not easy making progress. It can be very difficult and very challenging, but at the end, the prize is worth going through what you have to go through, and you just have to do your best and go through it. That's the story of our country in the United States, for those who are, here in the US. And so I just got from my educational upbringing that you stick to the truth, and it may not be popular, but you follow it. And that's what you learn in graduate school. That was good thing I learned in graduate school. You stick to the data, and you go with it. And it may not be popular, but that's what you do. And that's what gives you a degree in the end. Well, if you do that with these topics, you have all the evidence, you stick with it. Now, The harder they attack you, the more you realize you're going to win, because they're not attacking you on a good basis. They're doing character assassination, ad hominem attacks. They're avoiding the evidence. These are all traits of people that don't really know much about the topic and are just kind of doing a quick hatchet job for whatever motivation they're working from. And you don't have, you have to, that's what they do because they're stuck in their particular point of view. You don't have to convince them. You just have to say, well, can we agree to some basic ground rules about what the evidence would look like if such a thing were to be true? And if they're not willing to do that, then they're not even in the realm of rationality or science anymore. They're just in their own fantasy from the past, and you can't help them. But you know when they're doing that, rather than getting discouraged and feeling we're never going to make progress, like, God, they must be desperate if this is the way that they're applying swamp gas and Venus and all this.
There's that famous quote.
Policemen, they're not making this stuff. Are you crazy?
Of course.
They used to say this about the people that discovered meteorites. They said this about the Wright brothers. They said this about the people that discovered cold fusion, quasi-crystals. In fact, they've been wrong throughout history. They always say the new stuff is wrong, and they're wrong in the end. All these things turned out to be real. Every time you get on an airplane, just remember how much the Wright brothers were ridiculed by the media.
Wow, that's a great point.
They weren't supported by the U.S. government.
They say first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight at you, and then you win. And I think you kind of just went. You
just enjoy it. Enjoy the challenge of it, because it means when we win at the other side, it's going to be that much more satisfying to know that you were right from the beginning. You weren't crazy. This was real, and it was society that was off base, and it had to be corrected in a natural way through argument.
And you're one of those people who's pushing that envelope. And so, I appreciate what you're doing. And I think the future history will appreciate you being one of the visionaries who latched on early and pursued tenaciously an understanding of these topics and shared that information with the general public and continue the education process. So, I just really appreciate your time, Dr. Hein. I hope that people check out your channel and check out your blog. There's a lot of information there, a lot of different depths and levels. And I hope I appreciate your time so much. Very gracious to give us so much time, and I couldn't stop it. There's too much info flowing in.
Yeah. We'll continue. We'll continue on another time. Thanks for making. I know it's a little long, but we'll continue on. We can talk specifically about any of these. The crop circles in and of itself deserves its own.
Absolutely.
But until the next time, people should go to my YouTube channel. They should go to learnrv.info just for some free RV practice. I mean, the worst that could happen is like nothing happens. It's not going to bite you. Try it and see. Some people have told me just from those little mini practice sessions, they say, wow, I can't believe I got XYZ and that was there. It's because it works. And of course, my books are Opening Minds, Planetary Intelligence, about connecting to kind of the natural intelligence of nature. And my most recent one was about all these UFO witnesses I've encountered in the past 20 years, Black Swan Ghosts, which I think personally contains some excellent stories, very credible witnesses of really strange stuff, just like the UFO field is. Just incredible stuff. What are these people encountering? Anyway, that's Black Swan Ghosts. And even if you don't want to, I'm not saying you should get Black Swan Ghosts, you can watch my videos that were the basis of the book at blackswanghost.com. There's a witness video link at the top. It's free. You can click on there, and as you read the book, or even if you just want to see you can listen to some of these very extensive interviews. Just make your mind up whether these people sound credible to you or not. I found them credible, and that's why I put up the videos, and they were kind enough to let me put them up. Very excellent stories, real weird contact of something real that, again, just remind yourself, you don't have to understand it. It still could be real. Maybe we'll all figure it out together, but there's some other stuff going on, and the volume knob's going up right now. So I would advise people to prepare yourself and read as much as you can about this, so you're not in this kind of future shock that the rest of society is going to be in when the truth of these subjects come out over the next couple of years.
Well, thank you so much for your time, for your research, and then your generosity to put out all this stuff for free. The remote viewing class, the basic class, the Black Swan Ghost stories. You could have held that to the vest just for your book or stuff like that. Your openness and transparency is really appreciated in this field. And thank you so much, Dr. Hein. It's very much. And we're looking forward to that next video.
Okay, take care for now.
Thank you, Dr.